Welcome back, anime fans, to another episode of What's the Difference, where I compare the various incarnations of any given media. In this case, it's comparing the Shaman King manga to its 2001 anime and its 2021 anime. Up until more recently, it's been fairly consistent in its comparisons, but once our heroes had to travel to America, that's where the changes started to be a little bit more drastic. Whereas in the manga and newer anime, the trip through America feels like at most about a month or so. Whereas in the original anime, it felt like several months of a journey. But there were benefits and downsides to both. In terms of the manga, the trip through America felt like a side situation. Nothing really too relevant came from that journey. Yes, getting to the shaman fight, you met new characters, but the relationship that our heroes had with those new characters wasn't really built upon. A lot of that is kind of saved once they get to the Patch Village, whereas with the original anime, it's greatly expanded upon. There's a lot of moments where there's camaraderie built, the characters get to know each other, they spend time with each other. There's no room whatsoever to question their friendship. And in terms of time, when it comes to the newest anime, it's not specific with a lot of the passages of time. So, in certain situations where it's prevalent to say that several months have passed, it doesn't do that in certain situations, which I think is a detriment to it. As in some cases, it feels like, oh, maybe a few days have passed when actual months have passed. However, there's also a situation to be made because in terms of the older anime, our heroes were given access to a book of secrets that was held by the enemy Hao, and it unlocked a great amount of power for them. However, whereas in the original anime, everyone gains that power, but it only brings them so far. There's still room for them to grow in certain situations. Whereas in the manga and newer anime, that power up that they receive, only specific characters receive that, and it creates a lot of plot points and drama and characterization for some of our heroes. Another downside that I've seen with the original anime is that a lot of the shaman fights that take place as our heroes journey across America feel kind of petty in a lot of situations. Like they're just offhanded brawls that just erupt out of nowhere for the most lightest of reasons. Like you got slightly offended in a bar, and so it's just like, let's take this outside, which is literally situations that have happened in the original anime. Whereas in the manga and newer anime, those situations were actual shaman fights, like scheduled events that characters had to undergo, that they had to deal with, that they had to overcome. So there continues to be positives and negatives all across the board. The manga does contain certain pacing issues in certain places where you can tell that the author was still ironing out some of his kinks, but as a whole, the art is fantastic, and the storytelling and a lot of the character moments are well portrayed. The original anime has some amazingly animated moments here and there and does a fantastic job of building its atmosphere. It's just that sometimes the plot just kind of meanders just a little too much. And the newer anime, while the colors are fantastic, and it has the benefit of having the finished, finalized designs for a lot of elements within the Shaman King manga that didn't get solidified until closer towards the end of its run, sometimes the animation just feels a little too stiff, or originally it sped too quickly through a lot of content, but it started to slow down on that front and is actually taking its time. There's a better animation coming in certain places. It's starting to feel as though the animation team is starting to put forward a little bit more work the further it starts to deviate away from where the original anime went when it went in its own direction. Now, in terms of today's manga and anime coverage, there's a bit of a caveat. You see, the original anime places the events of the latest, newer anime episode much later down the line. There are several episodes that are kind of sandwiched in between, and it's about 10 episodes before we get to the core of the newest anime and what it adapts from the manga. So I'll quickly go through a lot of the events that happened in between where we left off with the original anime with episode 44, One More Push. And we had already covered episode 45, Great Spirits, where everyone had finally arrived in the Patch Village. So the episodes we have yet to see is 46 onward. So let's start with episode 46, The Dead Spirit of Tao. Now we're starting to see some of the events of the shaman fight in terms of the older anime, but most of it is now kind of just filler because a lot of those the original shaman fights from the manga were used as moments in America that our heroes had to overcome. But it's also not the worst because a lot of moments in terms of the opponents that we would have seen in the shaman fight, fights that we never got to see, we at least get to have that used as a buffer. Interestingly enough, this is a Tao family focused episode. We also have the moment where they start to decide on team names, and we get to see the return of one of the filler members of the Tao family. It's mostly an episode about infighting within the Tao family and the apparent consequences of Ren's decision to kind of break away from them. Whereas in the manga, everybody's pretty much supporting Ren at this point. And interestingly enough, the first team that Ren's team goes up against is actually members of his own family. That is an interesting direction, even if only just for filler. Getting to see a little bit of Ren's determination, no matter who he has to face. I love the camaraderie we actually see between Anna and Tao Jun. It actually shows that they're, to a certain degree, kind of become friends at some point. Ren wants to fight them alone, and Ren pretty much tanks all of their attacks. Ren's just accepting all of their anger and hatred. There's a real heartfelt moment for Ren here, which is actually pretty nice. It really does show how much growth he's had. And so they properly clash, and you even get Ren's character song playing in the background, something that is kind of lacking from the new anime is all the great character songs you'd have, and Ren's still determined to take down Yo at some point. Of course they win the fight and all that, and he passes out from all the damage he took, going out like a Chad. The next episode is episode 47, Really Naive. And we actually get to see the first battle for Team Funbaryosen. It's a bit of a cold opening, and this episode focuses on Ryu. Again, the benefits of having these filler moments is that you can focus on pretty much every character at least once. It's funny too, because over time, the shaman fights, despite the fact that they had only just started, are given a almost mundane and uninteresting atmosphere to a certain degree. I get it, a lot of the other goings-on aren't important to the plot, but it's just dang. Ryu heads out to find information on their upcoming opponent. A little bit of Ryu and Manta spending time together. Always nice. Also Ryu hitting on some ladies. I'm glad he's hitting on some who are a little bit closer to his own age. Team Arabian. Jeez. It's actually nice to see people in the shaman fight who have, very sweet and caring dreams. That's something that's not given enough attention, I feel, in the manga. The fact that a lot of people came to the shaman fight in order to bring a more natural balance to the world. But not many of them were actually looking to wipe out humanity or anything like Hao is. It's stop hitting on my woman! Ooh, don't talk with men without my consent. Yeah, more shamans who are talking about having their lands taken over and how humanity is destroying the world. I gotta say, considering how conservative he is with his fiance, I'm surprised she isn't wearing a full body burqa. Airing Japanese anime in America. Talking about how often they air them in America too. Jeez. That's a little right on the nose. It's also interesting too that in the older anime they didn't have the fights take place in one arena. They just had it take place in various areas around the Patch Village, fighting against a genie. That's actually pretty cool. Oddly enough, we already have an Arabian character on a house team, or I should say Arabic, and a lot of retread here about Ryu and his beliefs. I mean, I guess a lot of these episodes are good for solidifying how we feel about certain characters before we get towards the end and Ryu gets to dominate. It is nice that they do reveal that, well, I mean, he still struck her, so I feel odd about that, but she cares about him, he cares about her, so maybe they work towards something better. And Ryu is devastated. Magic carpet ride. And we see the other girl was also super hot. And now we enter into episode 48, Dragon Missionary. And this episode is a Horo Horo episode. And we also get to see that Horo Horo's little sister has also come. And you have these charlatans who feel some kind of way about children being in the shaman fight. Some religious zealots. These guys become determined to save Horo Horo, and back to Horo Horo's training. These guys have become obsessed with Horo Horo, and he tells them about his dream, and then of course he's mocked for it. And then Horo Horo tells everybody about what he was told. I gotta love that Horo Horo's sister actually enjoys Chocolo's jokes. But there's a delay, and then the announcement comes in of who they're fighting. Each other, of course. Team Sabbath. A little bit of reaffirmation of Horo Horo's passion, his quest, and a little bit of his love for his sister. It's sweet. But the leader wants to fight Horo Horo personally. It's become a battle of conviction for him. And Ren rolls with it, thinking that, of course, Horo Horo won't lose. Both Chocolove and Ren easily defeat their opponents. Also, I love this team's attack names, because they're all just bands and song references like Rainbow in the Dark. And Horo Horo's been transported to this almost pocket-like dimension. And it starts to look like Horo Horo might lose. I love the imagery. See, the animation really increased for this episode at this point. And even with a lot of the filler characters, there's some great designs for these, filler spirits, oversouls and stuff. Naked sister. But, oh man, the animation here. Like, man, the new anime really needs animation like that. If it did, it would be phenomenal. The guy has no choice but to kind of eat his words, but he makes it seem like that's what he wanted all along. And he treats Horo Horo as a disciple now, and more training. And then next up we have episode 49, Doctor Doctor, and a little bit of a recap from Manta. And this is a Faust episode, obviously. And Faust comes across a young lady, and she's also in the shaman fight, and also the mother of someone. It's actually a very nice family, something that Faust might have had in another life. And everybody's actually fascinated in the idea of a family participating, and Manta's kind of smitten with the purity of such a team. And we see how they use their oversouls basically to empower each other. And Faust seems to know that something's not right about how they use that power. And Manta's not too happy about not trying to advise against this. And then we see that Team Fumbariosen will be going up against them next. And Faust wants to take it on personally. And we actually get a little bit more on Manta and his complex feelings towards Faust. I'm actually glad there's an episode kind of going a little bit more into that. And despite the fact that Faust tries to end the battle early, They just keep pouring more and more power, but it's a little too dangerous, and even Faust isn't okay with this. And an episode that shows the caring nature of Faust, how he can see, don't have your wife do this. You should cherish her life more than this. And recognizes how fragile that power is as it just crumbles under its own weight. One of the more powerful episodes, honestly. It's interesting because Faust notices that their son was actually ailing, and the whole reason they were fighting in the shaman fight was to cure their son. It gives a lot of credence to his role as a doctor, and it helps be the thing that helps Manta kind of get over any repressed trauma he has towards Faust. And then we have episode 50, I Have a Darkness in My Heart. This episode actually does have a little bit of bearing in the plot because you have reference to the person that Ren had killed, the patch official. You have Necrom meeting up the brother of Crom. Yeah, this is an episode that tries to deal with some of Ren's sins. You also have a pseudo version of the third great power in Shaman King, whereas in the manga you had Hao side, the X-Laws, and then the third one, which was the Gandhara, who were led by a woman named Sati, who had a great deal of power, and there's something off about them. They're called the Daireidao here, and even Hao has a bit of an interest in them because of how mysterious they are. A power to control spirit, led by Lady Nyoran. It's funny because Lady Nyorai is the name of their team, and Ren's torment at what he did because he's trying to change and become something better. It's a fascinating angle to go with his character, and they take Ren to see Nyorai just because there's the potential to get him healed of his past torment, and they don't want to tell Yo about it. And Horohoro's pain was preyed upon when he went there, past resentment, and that's him not being able to win against Yo. It kind of comes out of nowhere to a certain degree in the older anime because it seemed like something he had put behind him. It doesn't seem like it would have been something even remotely lurking in his heart to any certain degree. And it's interesting that Chocolove wants to try to deal with this because Horohoro also wanted to deal with this himself. Chocolove tries to confront Nyorai and all of them about what was going on, and it's revealed that Nyorai has been trying to win without even fighting, but it's their opponents. Daireido is Team the Ren's opponents in the shaman fight, so the fight's gonna take place here. It basically leaves Chocolove as the only person who can fight. I guess it's probably for the best that in this version, Chocolove didn't have any kind of sins that could be preyed upon, or regrets, I guess. And Ren's just become completely unstable because of the fear within him. And so, of course, Nyorai tries to go after the darkness in Chocolove's hearts, but he really doesn't have anything like that. So she tries to play upon his insecurities about potentially not being funny, which he isn't. So he's given visions of being a failed comedian. Of course, he makes a big joke of it, and it's a massive pun. A very terrible pun. And this actually manages to break Horohoro and Ren out of their stupor, and they easily defeat their opponents, who weren't even actually people. They were just oversouls, which, honestly, the fact that she was able to even fool the officials means that she never even had a team. It's actually pretty impressive, and she's forced to confront her own darkness, but Chocolove is able to actually get through to her in the end. And so we have episode 51 titled Shaman Hunt, that takes place basically around the same time as the previous episode. We have Silva encountering some shadowy figures, and Mikihisa has to come and help Silva out. And these guys are just going around sealing people and getting information on Yo, and taking away people's abilities to use their spirit, and treating it like they're doing good deeds all across the land. Meanwhile, Yo the Spirit of Sword whole situation is a little much for his Fortyoku output. Meanwhile, the Shaman fights have been postponed or not able to go on because of what those trio of people have been doing. That's the funny thing about the Shaman fights, is like there's always some reason they're halted or postponed or cancelled in some way in the original anime. Whereas in the manga, it's just like, yeah, no. Our heroes had their go first, all the other fights are going on, there's plenty of time. But we also see Tokagero get sealed, and we see that they're going to use Mosuke to seal away Amidamaru. Meanwhile, Manta and Tamao are investigating things. Stuff like this is why I thought Manta and Tamao were going to have some kind of relationship in the future. Just as proxy, Manta encounters the Lily Five. Amidamaru overhears people just randomly talking about him being an evil spirit for some reason. Something that was never really prevalent originally in the original manga. Because what he did, slaying all those samurais, it's just like, because they attacked him. That was his whole backstory. He was attacked in a very mean-spirited way. He was completely in the right to defend himself. We also see the trio going to use Manta for their plans and shove Mosuke's spirit into his body, which sends him into a rampage. And he's just off in the woods forging stuff when Yo shows up, and we're introduced properly to Fudo, who's going around sealing people and their spirit, and he fully believes he's doing the right thing. And apparently he knows Mikihisa because Mikihisa had worked with him before, but it wasn't quite what he wanted it to be. They're all about exorcising evil spirits, whereas Mikihisa is about, working with spirits. And Fudo believes that Amidamaru is possessing Yo. And for some reason, Amidamaru believes into this. It's great that we're having an episode focused on Amidamaru, but it's just like, they're giving him guilt that was never there. And I'm not just talking in terms of the manga, but even in the original anime, Amidamaru never had any of that guilt. It makes no sense here. And of course, Faust takes offense to the idea of this. Unfortunately, he's not really able to do much. They're kept at bay by the other two Fudo's followers, I guess, and Amidamaru just kind of accepts what's happening to him, despite Yo's protest. And we get this backstory of Amidamaru being sealed away, which never happened, like sealed into his grave or whatever. It's just like, but that never happened. Yo tries to convince Fudo that he's been lending Amidamaru his body, and they're friends, so they decide to use Manta in order to take them. And Manta tries to communicate with Mosuke, and tells Mosuke to use his body in whatever way possible in order to prevent this. So Mosuke breaks free, and Manta uses his laptop as a medium, and he's given an oversoul. Interestingly enough, the one thing I don't really hate in terms of the changes that they made, I kind of like that Manta was given a medium and a spirit who could help him out in times of crisis. So Yo creates the Spirit of Sword, defeats Fudo, and tries to convince him that he and Amidamaru are allies. What they're doing isn't a bad thing, but it has to be Mikihisa who knows Fudo's backstory to actually convince him. And ultimately Fudo relents. And with everything said and done, they think that Mosuke has just returned to heaven after all of this, only for him to be trapped in Manta's computer. And then we get episode 52, Special Training, Everyone Gather, where we see Hao just utterly decimating his opponents. Hao's first match, of course, is basically a slaughter, but it's given so little focus in terms of the original anime, whereas in the manga, it's a big deal. And Yo feels bad, he wants to interfere with a lot of Hao's matches, doesn't want a necessary loss of life, and Mikihisa enters and tries to kind of pit the two teams against each other, trying to train them in the fight against Hao. And then they create weird combinations in order to match up against How? It's the weirdest clash imaginable. And Anna explains that it's not really properly powerful, so he sends in his own spirits to kind of show off how impractical these things are, as they're easily taken off guard. And Mikihisa explains that, yeah, Hao's just much stronger than you guys. So Mikihisa proposes a training course in order to help them out, which involves finding a grain of rice in the sand that they wrote something on. Mikihisa throws them into the desert and go find them. And Anna forces them to do it. Mikihisa feels that it's all about strengthening the different abilities of a shaman, but the next match will be Yo's team against a team called the Oceans 3, but Mikihisa has some advice. And despite all the time that has passed, the Lily 5 hasn't decided who will actually be in their 3-person team. And it's weird because it makes no sense that the Lily 5 wouldn't have even had one fight, or when they have been disqualified by this point. Yeah, the way this tournament is arranged in the original anime is just really weird. And Ren's team is just still out there looking. And now for some reason, a lot of the matches are actually taking place in the actual arena. And it makes no sense that they would struggle against these guys. And Ren's just out there getting frustrated. Meanwhile, Yo's team won, but not really the way Mikihisa wanted them to. And then it's finally time for the Lily 5 to have a match. And it's up against Hao's group, which Yo and the others are just like, you guys are gonna die. Yeah, they're essentially dead. And Hao's completely fine with destroying them. And now we're in episode 53, titled Bye Bye. And the Lily 5 aren't willing to withdraw. But then they hear that Hao has killed every opponent they've come up across. Honestly, this episode is kind of a swan song to the Lily 5. And while Yo wants to respect their choices, it's just kind of like, oh, this is a situation where they are definitely going to die. Meanwhile, Ren's team has just gone off and done their own training, and Ren really doesn't want to listen to what Mikihisa has to say. Which is funny because the whole training by Mikihisa is a Ren-centered thing in the manga. And the Lily 5 try to psych themselves up for a victory. And Yo goes looking for Hao, asking why he kills his opponents. And Hao believes in the useful and the useless. And Hao doesn't care about any of that, he just wants Yo to get stronger. And Hao fully intends on killing the Lily 5. And Yo feels that it'll be his fault if he doesn't stop them from being killed. And so the day of their battle arrives. And Yo basically has come to stop the Lily 5 from marching to their death. Meanwhile, Ren and his team are trying to figure out a best way to train. And Mikihisa tells them that doing it his way is probably best, but if he wants an opponent to train against, Mikihisa will be his opponent, because Ren's someone who believes in action more than anything else. But this is something from the manga, so just gonna skip over this. And so the Lily 5 go to take on Yo, not wanting to back down. I do find it interesting that the animation staff wanted to at least make sure that the Lily 5 had some kind of note to go out on. And you actually get some of the Lily 5's backstories, oddly enough. Sharona trying to help out her friends, only to be seen as the problem. Millie constantly being able to see ghosts, but being shunned by her mother, being shunned by the people you love, being called a weirdo, and of course Sally's anger issues. And so they concentrate all of their attacks on one spot, and if they can't win alone, maybe if they combine all of their abilities. And they do manage to actually get Yo with one hit, which they're overjoyed by, of course. But then Anna tells them, you can only have 3 people in your squad, and maybe if it was all 5 of you, you might have a slim chance, but Anna meant to make it known that this isn't about you being strong or weak, and so ultimately they withdraw, which gets Hao pretty upset, and they get to have it known that they were the ones who upset Hao. It's something minor, but it's something. Meanwhile, Ren and Yo have a little bit of a moment after both of their encounters, and they both do in fact find the grains of rice. Just not their grains of rice. And the next episode we have is episode 54, The Eighth Angel. And of course we have an X-Laws episode with a little bit more of Lyserg's apprehension in what they're doing. And of course Yo and the others have come to check this out. Apparently they're going up against minions of Hao. Meanwhile Hao has gone after the one guy from a few episodes ago. And so the minions of Hao take on Fudo's other followers, more or less, only for them to be completely unscathed and utterly decimate them, like straight up murdering them. And of course Fudo's not gonna stand for that and tries to go in and fight Hao, and Fudo is killed by Hao and has his soul consumed by the spirit of fire. And a few more of Hao's followers have lost, but he couldn't care less, and so they're ready to execute. Silva tries to stop them, which wasn't really something Silva was supposed to do, not involve personal feelings. And this is where we get a bit of the overlapping plot for the most part. As whereas in the original anime, during this encounter, when Yo ends up seeing Lyserg, he comments on the fact that Lyserg doesn't seem very happy. And Lyserg mostly just sees it as conviction, nothing more, nothing less. You know, they paint it as a very painful situation as Lyserg is kind of fighting against his better nature. Meanwhile, in the newer anime and the manga, the encounter between Lyserg and Yo is a lot more cordial. It's not terrible. He's just checking in, seeing if Lyserg is doing okay, and that's it. He just wanted to make sure his friend was good. There's no kind of guilt trip. Yo's not trying to be that present force that turns Lyserg back to the light. It's, you made this choice, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And initially, it's more, Lyserg's time with the X-Laws seems more like a school more than anything else. Lots of rules, lots of regulations. And Lyserg actually apologizes for just up and leaving, but he felt like he wasn't going down the right path that he wanted if he stayed with Yo and the others. You know, they make it known that their time together was an obligation, that he was under no restraints or restrictions, but Yo does notice something's up. But he's not one to press an issue like this. At least not in this version. A little bit more so in the original anime. He just wants to hang out with his friend a little bit. And Lyserg actually appreciates this. You know, I like the fact that despite everything, they're still friends. That's one of the selling points to me on this. It's just like, yeah, I still care the fuck about you, Lyserg. Yeah, we might have different viewpoints, but I'm not going to demean your choices. I'm not going to look down my nose at you. I'm just want to know that you're okay and that you're happy with this choice and that you're fine with this. Meanwhile, in the original anime, everyone's just kind of, well, mostly Ryu is moping about Lyserg, and they're all kind of feeling some way about the direction that Lyserg has gone into. And it's funny too because they say he's changed, but I really don't feel like Lyserg has changed that much in the original anime because he was always kind of going down this path. Meanwhile, Silva is getting caught up in his feelings, despite the fact that he's supposed to be completely impartial. You know, personal feelings are forbidden and all that good stuff. Meanwhile, Lyserg is, given a choice, it's just like you could either get an angel or you could throw away morphine. It's just like, I don't know, I don't like that weirdly cruel direction things go in. Like, yes, throw away the symbol of your parents, the whole reason you're even doing any of this. Like, in the manga, when the thought of Lyserg giving up morphine for his angel comes up, he's immediately like, I would never throw away morphine. I would never even consider that. Like, Lyserg full on would never even remotely consider that in the manga. Like, had that happened, I doubt he would have stayed with the X-Laws. That's the thing. That's the big difference of Lyserg in the original anime and in the manga. I do respect that Marco in the original anime does feel something towards Lyserg. In all versions he does, but it's a little bit muddied to a certain degree. In both versions, Marco is a little too overzealous for his own good. And Morphine even chooses not to follow Lyserg in this. And Lyserg doesn't even think about the fact that Morphine isn't following him. Like, they really do build up the turmoil that everyone goes through over Lyserg leaving, and Morphine even tries to get the guys to get them to help Lyserg, kind of pull him back from the brink that he's going down. And the guys from earlier come to get their revenge for being pushed out of the X-Laws. Lyserg wants to prove himself in this moment, and he doesn't even realize that Morphine isn't with him. The guys are utterly decimated by the other X-Laws. When Morphine does show up, Lyserg berates her, yells at her for humiliating him, as he puts it. Like, the incorporation of Lyserg into the fold of the X-Laws is much more tumultuous in the original anime. And it does build for good drama. It's a very poignant moment. But it's a lot more confrontational here, which there is a plus to that. Don't get me wrong, there is definitely a positive to that, but it always rubbed me the wrong way because it's just like, Lyserg, you're throwing away even the last gift you got from your father? The father who you cared so much about? And then he just, he takes off the pendulum and everything. And full-on spoilers, he never does this in the manga. He sticks to his love and compassion for this thing. This final gift he got from his father, the last embers of his parent. I don't know, it just always rubbed me the wrong way. And it was the biggest thing that really just solidified a lot of my negative emotions towards Lyserg. And he does get Zuriel and all versions, but it's really kind of messed up the way this was done. And Yo has pretty much given up on Lyserg at this point. That's something that always got me. This was the point where Yo had kind of given up on Lyserg. It's just he made his choice and he gives up. And it doesn't that feel like such a major contrast to whereas in one version you have Lyserg and Yo kind of parting on good terms. Lyserg just wanted to make sure that, Yo just wanted to make sure that Lyserg was okay with his decision, and Lyserg gets to feel grateful that Yo cared enough about him to, despite his kind of betrayal, it wasn't seen as them ending their friendship. Whereas in the original, it's they're done with each other. Completely and utterly. It's you've chosen this path, and even Yo has given up on him. And from a certain perspective, it makes a lot of sense that, the original anime does go into a lot more depth with Lyserg and his emotional trauma, his issues, how far down he falls and all of that, but Yo completely deciding to just give up on Lyserg, where he doesn't even completely turn back or anything like that, that hit in a completely different way. Even Yo gave up. And then Marco's just we're gonna kill Yo and Hao. That's our plan right now. It's this plan to eliminate all things evil. The X-Laws are up to some serious shit. We even have Silva confronting Godiva. We enter into episode 55, Gate of Babylon, where Ryu is naturally looking pretty depressed about what Lyserg did, turning his back on him. Honestly, all of them really are. They're taking it fairly hard, because they wanted to believe that Lyserg could turn around. Meanwhile, the Great Spirit hasn't been communicating with anyone in terms of setting up matches, almost like it's gone dormant. More padding out of things. But I guess you could also see it as an ominous moment as something's about to happen. Manta tries his best to find out some information, but his laptop's acting a little janky for some reason. Ryu goes off to sulk and Manta goes after him as well. Meanwhile, the X-Laws are setting up the Gate of Babylon, and we're informed that they'll be using Yo as a kind of bait. They'll lock him within it in order to bring Hao to them as well. Meanwhile, Lyserg, he's still kind of feeling a little bit off because he abandoned Yo, he abandoned Morphine, all of that. And Mina has been a great sense of kindness towards him. And we have this great moment where we have, Mina and the others try to talk to Lyserg through his situation, building up their kind of friendship, a bit of kindness between all of them. It's a good way of showing why Lyserg still is with them. If they were just cruel people, no. But they're caring, they look after him, they comfort him. It's mostly Marco who tends to be a little bit on the volatile side with him, very heavy-handed. But there is a kindness behind Marco as well. And they're all kind of in the zealot state. They want to make sure, no matter what, that Hao is eliminated. That's their single-minded goal, even if that means sacrificing Yo, which still puts me a little bit at odds with Lyserg's character, but at the same time it's not like Ren, Ryu, Horohoro haven't been, even Faust, they haven't been opponents to Yo in the past. Lyserg's situation is just different because he became friends with Yo and then turned against him. Meanwhile, Ryu is still out there sulking up a storm. Manta tries his best to come up with a way of cheering him up to some degree, and Ryu actually lashes out at Manta, who's been feeling very useless throughout all of this. He wants to make some kind of a difference or help out in some way, but whatever he tries just doesn't seem to work out. Then we get a little bit more of the friendship that Manta and Ryu have had. Honestly, it's a very underrated element within the series, because even in the manga, there are a lot of times when the person most in Ryu's corner outside of Yo is Manta. So the original anime really does a great job of showing off that Manta and Ryu have this special bond and friendship. That even though Ryu is kind of sulking about something that he can't really change, Manta's still there for him. It's a nice little bit of a moment. Unfortunately, this is kind of interrupted when Manta is kidnapped by Lyserg in order to use him as bait to draw in Yo. And Lyserg even shows off his new angel in order to stop Ryu from stopping him. It's kind of messed up that he really does attack Ryu, especially considering that the first time we see Lyserg's angel in the manga, it's actually to help out Horohoro, though it is to help him out in taking down some followers of Hao. He still mostly uses it to help Yo and his friends, not to hurt him, just like in the original anime. It's an interesting juxtaposition to see that the original anime is Lyserg continuously going down this downward spiral, whereas in the manga, he's always at a middle point, never quite on Yo's side, but never quite against Yo. And so they're holding Manta hostage, and Manta is trying his best to be like, yo, you need to stop this. Meanwhile, Ryu tells everyone about what happened, and of course it's obviously a trap, but Yo's going anyway. And so is everyone else. It's just like, yeah, we're not gonna let this stand. We're not gonna let these X-Laws have their way. And naturally, Hao knows something is up as well, and is bringing his whole crew along for the ride. Meanwhile, Silva questions why the Great Spirit isn't doing anything, why the Patch isn't doing anything. It's very tumultuous for him because it's like, what's going on? What are we doing? Why aren't we acting? The X-Laws, how? They're all just doing what they want, and we're doing nothing? We also have the explanation that the Gate of Babylon will open up and suck in any souls present in the vicinity, and they're hoping that, with Hao being there to rescue Yo, he'll be sucked in as well, and they'll just be done with the two Asakuras in general, as well as their followers. Naturally, Yo and his team arrive on time to try to save Manta, coming into opposition with the X-Laws, and they're told as long as they cooperate with them, Manta will be released. Manta's just like, yeah, they told me their plan, it's a lie. But Yo goes along with it anyway in order to save Manta. And so he goes in order to enter, and Manta desperately wants to stop it so that nothing happens to him. What Yo's plan in this situation was is very kind of nebulous to me, because it's just like, did he know nothing would happen? What? But Manta is able to be freed thanks to the fact that Mosuke is still within his laptop. So Musuke is able to respond at least a little bit to his Furyoku. And so Ryu manages to catch him just in time. And Marco uses this moment to try to go after Yo, but he's thrown his weapons and he is able to go in for the fight. Giant Amidamaru and everything. But the whole squad comes in to back him up. But Marco and Lyserg, they're not gonna let what they're doing to be in vain. But Iron Maiden Jean has other plans. Instead of focusing on the Gate of Babylon, she'll work towards capturing all of them. So she uses her spirit Shamash in order to imprison all of them in a cage, which makes it so that they can't use their Furyoku. Oddly enough, why she's never unleashed this before is anyone's guess. Maybe because it's not from the manga or she's never had this power before. That would be my best guess, because I'm pretty sure we never see that in the manga. And so they're placed within the Gate of Babylon, only for this awesome entrance by Hao, as he manages to just come in out of nowhere with him and his entire gang. It's an amazing entrance, and it really does show how great the theatrics and ominous nature that you see from a lot of moments in the original anime really can be. And so the X-Laws can't attack as they fear harming Jean. Hao isn't too happy about them capturing his other half, as it were. And Jean is unflapped by any of this, and Hao's just burns her right then and there. Couldn't give less of a shit. Is actually pretty intense. And all of this sits in stark contrast to the newer anime and the manga, as the confrontation between Marco and Yo goes a lot differently. As he meets up with Lyserg and Yo's little rendezvous, and he takes offense to the fact that Lyserg was out past bedtime, and even hits Lyserg. And it's not just Marco, it's all of the X-Laws. And this comes despite the fact that Yo isn't really here to cause any kind of problems. But Marco sees Yo as a potential minion of Hao, trying to lead their comrade astray. And it's only because of the fact that Iron Maiden Jean actually shuts all of this down and says there is no malice within Yo. She recognizes that he is not evil. Though Marco, he's determined to take Yo down because he saved a minion of Hao. Doing even that much shows that he must be evil. But Jean is having none of this. He is a friend of Lyserg, so that means he is their friend as well. A friend of a friend is our friend. He was kind, and he didn't try to lead Lyserg away. He let Lyserg make his own decision. But Jean also wants to bring Yo into the X-Laws as well, which of course Marco is completely against. But Jean believes that Yo could be a great asset to them. And of course Yo doesn't go for that, ultimately saying just like, I don't like the way you guys do things. Now Jean does get upset by this, but in the manga it's played more for laughs, whereas in the newer anime it's played like it's a serious affront that Yo has done against her. Marco goes in for the attack, but he's stopped by Yo. And this is the real difference. It's just like, before Marco could even do anything, Yo is already oversold, all that good stuff, and is ready to take Marco down then and there if he goes any further with his attack. Like, there is no confrontation, there is no Yo versus Lyserg and Marco at the same time. I shut that down before it could even happen. Yo shows a lot of intensity in this moment, and Jean makes it known that Yo in this moment has a lot of power. He's more than a match for Marco at this time. But they won't face him here, they'll face him further into the Shaman fight when need be. And Yo more or less agrees to this because, if they fight, they fight. But he doesn't want to do anything unnecessary. I like that kind of stuff because it shows that Yo has gained a great amount of power. So has Ryo, so has Faust. But because they didn't have access to Hao's book, Ren, Chocolove, and Horo, they only have so much capability. And that's what makes the real difference between the manga and the original anime, is because, once they experience the Book of Hao, all of them should have been considerably a lot stronger than a lot of characters. But there are so many times when, some of our characters, they're just not capable in a lot of situations. They're just completely outclassed sometimes. And that makes it seem as though some of the teachings of Hao just didn't work as well for some as it did for others. Whereas in the manga, as opposed to the original anime, it's really like, no, the teachings of Hao were incredible. It brought Yo, Faust, and Ryu to a whole different level, a great amount of spiritual power, a greater amount of control over their Fortyoku. They just became these indomitable things that Ren, Horohoro, and Chocolove had to figure some kind of way in order to overcome. Next, we enter into episode 56, Door of Babylon. Silva continues to be very disillusioned with the patch and what little action they're taking. Jean does her best to withstand the flames of Hao, but ultimately she's burned but gets sealed within her Iron Maiden. Lyserg starts to lose heart. It's just like, even Jean couldn't defeat Hao, what help do we have? But Lyserg is then shown that Shamash is still activated. That means that Jean is still probably okay to some degree. Hopefully regenerating within the Iron Maiden, still being healed to some degree. So the X-Laws haven't lost faith, and they're determined to protect Jean no matter what. So Hao sends in his minions in order to, for retribution for capturing his other half. And so we get all these clashes between the minions of Hao and the minions of Jean. And, some pretty intense stuff goes on here. It's actually unfortunate because we never really see that much of stuff like this within the manga. Like, out and out fights between Hao's forces and Jean's forces. And while that is unfortunate, to a certain degree it makes it so that there's a bit of mystique to the powers of some of Hao's minions. Although you're never given an explanation early on why this one minion of Hao also has an angel. And there's a deeper story behind that, but the fact that it just kind of happens without any note, it's weird. But Yo sees that they're essentially trying to sacrifice themselves, and even Hao finds it stupid to do so, thinking that Jean has been completely done in by his flames. Meanwhile, Silva has finally decided to take some action, and even Caleb comes to help him out. But it becomes obvious that the X-Laws are probably going to start falling here. And whereas Yo and his friends are either distraught or just thinking that maybe it's for the best that what happens to them just kind of happens, that doesn't sit well with Yo, who just values life a little bit more than that. And even everybody else starts kind of feel like they could at least try to do something. It shows how big Yo's influence has come onto all of them. There are a lot of them who wouldn't care too much about human life in the past have really started to feel some kind of way about all of this. And so they go to try to break out of Jean's hold, but unfortunately it's a little too late in certain situations, as some of the X-Laws start to fall one by one, being essentially crushed by Hao's minions. And it's a lot of the forces who didn't actually die in the manga. That's the thing. A lot of these guys who end up being killed off one by one as this battle goes on, these were battles that took place between Ren's team and the minions of Hao. But here you have the X-Laws dying one after the other, and it's some pretty brutal stuff. And it's really kind of unfortunate, because it's just like dead, one after the other, and nothing could really be done to help these guys. And it enrages Yo to such an extreme degree. And then Iron Maiden's oversoul just dissipates all of a sudden. And it makes the X-Laws think that maybe Iron Maiden Jean has finally passed. And so the X-Laws lose heart, and that distracts them. And so the forces of Hao start to overwhelm them, seeing this as their opportunity to go in for the kill, only for them to be protected by Yo and his friend, with them simply saying, it's not because we like you guys or anything, it's just that we're not going to let Hao and his minions do whatever they please, and while the X-Laws would rather die with Jean if she's no longer around, they're going to be protected either way. And Hao tells some of his minions to just stand back. Lakiste and the others will handle this. Meanwhile, while Silva and Calum are on their way to interfere, Mikihisa sees this as the best chance of getting rid of Hao, and stops them before they can move forward. Meanwhile, we have a confrontation between Yo and Hao wants to test out the capabilities of Yo. How powerful has he become? So we get a pretty cool verses between Yo and Hao, who's acting a little bit more intense than usual. Like, Yo is pretty pissed. And we get these various battles between Yo's friends and Hao's minions, and Lyserg is made to feel a lot more regret about kind of turning his back on these people who would even save him despite all of this. But unfortunately, Yo is ultimately captured by the Spirit of Fire, but he's still released nonetheless, because it's not like Hao is going to do in his other half, as he wants Yo to become stronger, so that when they finally become one, he'll have his full power that he needs. Meanwhile, it's interrupted as Jean reveals herself to have been healed, and it's time for the Gate of Babylon, the Door of Babylon, to finally open, as everyone realizes that she broke her oversoul in order to strengthen the Gate of Babylon. However, because of this, Jean, some of her comrades had to be sacrificed, and she had to put her whole into the Gate of Babylon, meaning that she can't control it anymore, meaning that everyone will be sucked in indiscriminately. There's no control over it, which is just fine with the X-Laws. They've been ready to sacrifice themselves for their justice no matter what. Even Lyserg kind of resigns himself to what they're doing, fully embracing it no matter what. That's how his minions try their best to stop it, and their protection of the X-Laws leaves them kind of vulnerable to a lot of these attacks. They're literal meat shields, and are pretty much dying in the process, which Yo isn't too happy about. He finds it as needless sacrifices, but it's finally time as Shamash opens up the Door of Babylon, which pretty much consumes everybody. And it's just like, there they all go, right into the Door of Babylon. No matter who you are, what you are, where you are, you just go speeding right into it. However, before it closes, the Spirit of Fire grabs Shamash into the Door of Babylon as well. And I love this moment within the Door of Babylon, as you see everyone trapped within it, and they're just in this hazy, aimless kind of state. And that's Yo's friends, the X-Laws, even the minions of Hao, as their spirits start to dissipate within the gate. Like, they're just eroded slowly away. But they're able to be saved by Yo, who's able to protect all of his friends from being consumed, as Hao also protects his followers. And within this space, Hao tells Yo something that's a bit on the shocking cryptic side. And then we see everyone just kind of thrown out of the gate. And Hao has managed to grab Shamash and have it be consumed by the Spirit of Fire, granting its power to the Spirit of Fire as well. So, thinks back on what Hao said, and that's that the shaman fight is no longer needed for him. He's gained enough power to just kind of supersede it. Meanwhile, for the manga and newer anime in chapter 137 titled Burning Angel, the only stomping that we see of people by the forces of Hao is the decimation done by Team Flowers, who completely overcome their opponents in the shaman fight. Like, they just wipe them all out with a quickness. And this is just to get to the next fight, which is more important to the lot of them. And Horo comments that they couldn't have been that weak if they made it this far. it shows that the power of Hao can't be underestimated. But they'll find out soon in the next fight, which is the X-Laws versus Hao's team. Meanwhile, in the original anime, we get up to episode 57, the Shaman fight ends. Cute little moment between Hao and Opacha, as the minions of Hao have all congregated. And we also have the return of Peyote, whose return in the manga is a lot less opposed. As here, Hao is just kind of welcoming him back like, it's whatever. And like us, sees this as a problem because he lost to Yo in the Shaman fight. But Hao's just like, the Shaman fight doesn't matter anymore. To a certain degree in the manga, that was also true, as there are times when Hao's minions would interfere with others in the Shaman fight too, but that was kind of after some of them had lost. We also see a couple of members of the Patch have also sided with Hao, which also happens in the manga, but it wasn't just Necrom, it was someone else. Here in the original anime, it's Zinc. We also have a bit of Chocolove feeling some kind of way about the power that he saw from Hao. And he starts to feel a little bit of frustration and over how just completely all-consuming Hao's power seems to be. And we also get a little bit of Tama and Chocolove just kind of hanging out. Two of the more underdeveloped characters, honestly. And Jean has been completely taken out because she's lost both her spirit and she can't really heal anymore now. Marco is completely at a loss. They need her to recover and tell them what to do from here on out. And so they need a doctor in order to heal her. And of course Faust comes in and do just that, as he promises the X-Laws that, he's a professional, he'll do whatever he can in order to heal her. Whereas Tamao will use her Ouija board in order to find everyone. We also have Ryu confronting Lyserg with the question of, why does he weep? Does he weep over the regret over what happened to Yo and the others? Or is it just for the X-Laws? Lyserg says it's all for Jean, which it's kind of questionable at best. It's obvious to even Mina that Lyserg is wavering to some degree, and Mina tries her best to steer Lyserg away from following the X-Laws any longer because honestly she sees the writing on the wall that the X-Laws' days are numbered at this point. Their last best chance is kind of lost. So Mina tries to turn Morphine back over to Lyserg in order to get him to just leave. She sees the kindness within Lyserg deep down and wants that to be a positive angle for him. Lyserg, however, he's just still consumed with his want for vengeance, and he continues to just dismiss Morphine. Meanwhile, Silva confronts Godiva over what's been happening and feels that it's too far. They've done too much, they've gone too far, they need to stop them. However, this all changed when Hao just straight up raids where the Patch are, capturing Godiva, as he wishes to go to the holy ground of the Patch where the Great Spirit is, where only the winner of the Shaman fight is actually able to go normally. But Hao says the Shaman fight has concluded, there's no longer a need for any of this, and he attacks the Patch to get the information. Mikihisa steps forward to stop this though. We also have Horohoro and his sister meeting up and finding out about Furyoku amounts and the fact that apparently their oracle bells can tell you how much Furyoku you have. Horohoro has a little bit over 9,000. However, when he's shown how much Hao has, even his sister is just like, maybe we shouldn't press forward with this. Mikihisa tries to stop the Patch from going up against Hao as he feels like they just become fodder for the Spirit of Fire. And Mikihisa feels a sense of responsibility for Hao because he helped to bring him into this world. Where it's just like, yeah, he's gone too far. So we get a nice confrontation between Mikihisa and the Spirit and Hao. Meanwhile, June finds Ren, and Ren heard Hao speak and say that the Shaman fight is over, and Ren wants to stop him no matter what. We also find out that Ren has only about 10,000 for Yoku after all of this, and Necrom has come to confront him over killing his brother and bring him to Hao's side. because Necrom knows deep down Ren wants to defeat Ryo, and it's only through Hao Necrom believes that Ren can do that. And it's basically so that they can use Ren to make Yo stronger. So Necrom is basically using him as fodder to throw at Yo. And of course Ren takes offense to being just an object to train Yo. And he really takes it hard at that thought. Ryu finds Horo and tries to take him back, but Parika's just like, yeah, even your strength, Ryu, is just a little over 8,000. It's time to go home. But Horo isn't willing to give up just yet. He feels that as long as he's with his friends, they should be able to do something. And Anna reveals to Yo, which he already knows, that Hao has no intention of even becoming Shaman King. He's just gonna take the power that he needs. I mean, he has enough power to just take the Great Spirit. He's trying to basically supersede the whole shaman fight, and he was just consuming the most highest powered shamans who made it to the shaman fight in order to just gain enough power. I mean, it makes sense in the long run. He was weeding out the shamans where he could in order to get the most strongest to actually make it to the fight, and then with the strongest, he just consumed them and their spirit and just continue forward. But Anna's not having any of that. She wants him to go forward, stop him, and become the Shaman King himself. Meanwhile, Mikihisa has kind of lost to Hao, and even has his spirits consumed. And Mikihisa is severely burned and injured. And Hao just tells him, come to me to the Great Spirit and we'll settle everything there. And then it's revealed that Hao's Furyoku is, like, immense. Like, even if 100 of them came together, it would be impossible. It's over 1 million. But Yo decides that he'll be taking a break from the shaman fight in order to stop Hao. It's just a momentary thing, with them kind of ignoring the Oracle Bells and the power that is against them. However, Ren, he's got a bit of a bone to pick. And this is something that comes up in the manga as well. He wants the score settled between him and Yo. It's a pretty interesting moment, all things considered. Like, that rivalry is kept alive in the manga as well, but I feel like it was just a lot more consistent. I feel that in the original anime, they had a moment of Ren just kind of not being Yo's opposition the way he was all throughout the manga. Because in the manga, he never stops kind of being a real rival to Yo. If only just during their time traveling through America. And by having that lengthened out, there's a lot more time when Ren doesn't feel like a rival to Yo. It's only brought back to the forefront when they separate into teams, and Ren makes it known that, no, I will take Yo down. This is my last chance to really be an opposition to Yo. And then we get into episode 58 titled Flaming Angel, and we see these two little kid characters who were supposed to have more of an importance in the series, but because the original anime didn't really have anything for them, they're kind of an aside. But the relationship that Mikihisa had with Fudo in the original anime is kind of to a degree the relationship he had with these little kids. And everybody hears about how the shaman fight has pretty much been canceled, more or less. And Lyserg hasn't gone with the X-Laws, kind of skirting on the outside of them. And June, knowing what Ren is going through, asks him to just humor him for the most part, which Yo ultimately agrees to. And Yo was looking to test out something as well. But June knows something is kind of up here, and Yo kind of strengthens and sharpens his spirit of the sword. Ren thinks Yo is going easier on him, but this is Yo using that knowledge and putting it to the test. And we're starting to kind of see why I was never that big of a fan of the giant oversouls, because a lot of times they're nothing more than Furyoku balloons in a lot of situations. Like, Yo has more or less condensed his Furyoku to a fine point. And this is even a lesson that Ren is starting to kind of realize. And June knows that ultimately Ren does want to follow Yo, but at the same time he still just wants to be his own person to a certain degree. And it puts Ren in a more petty position, and I also feel like, it's Ren coming to a conclusion I think he should have came to a little bit sooner. Like, the battle between Yo and Ren that kind of happens in the manga to a certain degree happens in a different capacity to this. Just a straight up, let me be the initial final boss against you. Well, the pre-final boss fight. So they continue onward to a place where the kind of holy ground is. And, something about this is that it functions very differently in the manga. There's a place like this, but it's completely different to a certain degree in the manga. Meanwhile, despite the fact that, June went, most of the others stay behind. I do question June going and how much of a help she'll be, and Morphine is just kind of hanging out inside of Manta's computer, along with Mosuke. He's basically collecting them like Digimon, but there's Lyserg continuing forward. And while Anna discourages him going, Manta wants to follow as well. And so everyone else goes along too. And even the other Asakura show up. And we see Oppa-chao's spirit. And for everyone, whenever they try to go towards it, they just end up right back where they started. Can't really move freely within this forest. And then we basically end up in confrontations with the minions of Hao trying to stop Yo and his group. And Horohoro ends up being the one to try to hold them off. It's basically that, I'll stop them here, you go forward. I'll stop them here, you go forward. Interestingly enough, in the manga, he would not be able to hold these two off at this point. Like, Horohoro's good, but not against two of these opponents. But thankfully, Faust also stayed behind to help out. We get Big Billy versus Ryu, and Chocolate faces off against Peyote again. And finally, the revelation of Big Bill's spirits, that they were all his team. I think that's the first time it's mentioned in the original anime. Little Manta wandering through the forest, stumbling upon Lyserg, who overhears the plan of the X-Laws, but Manta kind of exposes him, and he's confronted over whether or not he's return to Yo's side. But this discussion they have here is something that comes up later on in the manga, as Hao actually ends up encountering the X-Laws, as Hao intends to take them on himself, as he's confronted by only 3 of the X-Laws. Now, this also happens in the manga. This is where we finally truly made it to the manga content. Over 10 episodes later. That tells you how dissipated all of this has been. Just sprinkled throughout. All of the manga content has just kind of been seeded throughout multiple episodes. Whereas in the manga, this is the start of Hao's first shaman fight. And the announcer is just going off about all of the background, the struggles, everything. And Vince Starr is the first to kind of get ready to throw down, as he's the captain of this team, and he's ready to deliver the death sentence. And in the manga and newer anime, Hao only confronts them by himself because he wants to put on a bit of a spectacle, feeling that he'll be enough. And in all versions, he even wanted Jean to come at him. He's just like, have all the X-Laws come at me. Like, that's how confident he was. There was no leave any of the X-Laws to his minions. It's just like, have all of your group come at me. Jean, all of you guys, come at me. I'll take you all on. That's how much of the smoke Hao wanted. That's how much he knew he would fillet these guys. And then they send out their spirits. And something that we never actually saw in the original anime, but comes up a lot in the manga, as well as the newer anime, is calculating the Furyoku level. just being like, okay, let me check on all of this, calculates all of them, and he's just completely unafraid as he just starts cutting through all of them like a hot knife through butter. And the first one to go down is Mina, as is actually in the original manga, Silva and Calum go up against Necrom and Zinc. It's actually interesting to have infighting amongst the patch, but it doesn't quite happen to that degree in the manga. It's actually a little fascinating. You have June going up against some of Team Hanagumi, and hearing what Lacaste's spirit is, Lucifer. It's just like the fallen angel, there's a lot of meaning behind his spirit. And just to not go in depth about who he is weird, as he faces off against Ren. Meanwhile, Mina's death in the original anime is just so not as brutal as it is in the manga and newer anime. Because in both, she's just straight up impaled by the spirit of fire. Whereas in the older anime, it's just kind of like, for some reason, taking down her spirit took her out as well. It's just like, that's not how that works. Like, there's no question that Mina is dead. She is done. And just showing how powerful Hao could be. And in all versions, Manta finds this just cruel and messed up. And Manta wants to do something about it in the manga, but he's stopped by Amidamaru. As Yo feels like there's something important going on here. He doesn't want to interfere with what they're trying to do. And in all versions, Vinstar is analyzing what happened, and they're just trying to get information on what Hao's power is. Whereas in the original anime, Manta is the one who comments on the fact that they're not even concerned by the fact that a teammate just died. It's Ryu who comments on that. And then Kevin steps up next, ready to throw down. Honestly, I like the way Kevin's mask looks in the manga and the original anime. Having it be silver in the newer anime just makes it feel a lot sillier than it actually is. And Hao comments on the fact that they seem so composed despite what happened. But he goes in even further in the manga and newer anime about how he really thought they would be at least a little bit more upset over all his comrades that died. And we don't even go into Kevin's personal vendetta against Hao, and that's how he burned Kevin's face some time ago, and the incineration of Mina's body just to clear off the field. And then he comments on the fact that they're just kind of throwing away their lives. But then Kevin goes in on the attack. He tries to go in an attack called Hell Endless. The Spirit of Fire just comes in and just shoves him to the ground right on top of Kevin, incinerating him right then and there. Kevin didn't even stand a chance. And this is kind of relevant because even Ren figures out after this what Hao's intermediary is. And Yo comes to the realization that the X-Laws were fully ready to just end themselves fighting up against Hao to get information. And that gave relevance to Yo's initial meeting with all of the X-Laws the day before the fight. They had steeled themselves to die. They were ready to end in this moment. And then we get Lyserg's little moment where he's slapped down and he's reprimanded by Marco. And Lyserg is mostly upset over what their plan is. He finds it too cruel, but Mina steps forward saying that it's fine, it's not bad that he feels sympathy for them, and Marco is angry about Lyserg being soft. And this is a nice moment where all of them tell Lyserg, we appreciate what you're feeling, your consideration. And in the original manga, we even have the moment where they take Lyserg's angel away from him, which I feel is counterintuitive to a certain degree. It's just let Lyserg keep the spirit. Let him keep the spirit. He does in the manga. Let him keep the spirit. But she doesn't want Lyserg getting involved. And this moment where Mina tells Lyserg that kindness and weakness are not the same thing. And that's something that I feel was highlighted better in the manga, frankly. That Lyserg saw his kindness as weakness. That's what Lyserg's struggle has been. That there are times when he feels happy, when he feels sympathy, when he feels kindness, when he feels a lot of what Yo feels. And Yo magnifies those emotions, and he sees that as weakness. And this, in this moment, is Mina saying, no, kindness is not a weakness. It's not wrong to be kind. In fact, she treats it as it's better that you be kind. Keep that kindness. Don't lose that kindness, because that is a good thing to have. And, it shows that they actually felt that the way Lyserg thought was a positive, but they were willing to just die. They felt that this was their path in life, the thing to do. And Lyserg's tears in this moment are a lot more justified to a certain degree, I feel, because Lyserg had always had this sympathy within him in the manga. There was very rarely an out-and-out bloodlust for him in the manga, as I felt there was in the original anime. Now, that isn't to say that Lyserg can't get a little murder happy in the manga. It's just that I felt that the kindness was a lot more apparent in the manga. Whereas in the anime, him just constantly fighting to be that angry person always made me feel some kind of way. That was always my problem. It's just like he was fighting to be an angry, vengeful person and was trying to do away with his kindness in the original anime. Whereas I always felt in the manga and newer anime, no, that he always kept that kindness. It was never in the background. It was never pushed to the side. It was never like it never felt like he was trying to push that side of him away. He was just trying to kind of keep that in the back of his head. Like he would never quite go to any real extreme lengths to do what he needed to do. If he had the opportunity to take down Hao or a minion of Hao, he'd do it. But if it came at someone else's expense, he'd usually try to help someone out beforehand. And we even have the moment where Jean tells Lyserg not to look away, as he must keep their memories safe no matter what, even until the bitter end. And then original anime before Vinstar's eventual end, we have Lyserg and Manta questioning the sacrifice. A little bit of Yo fighting someone who he didn't really take on too much. An interesting connection with Team Flowers. And Vinstar calling upon the other angels to kind of create this barrier. The same kind of barrier that was originally in the manga and was already just a setup from the Shaman fight in general. As we get to chapter 139, Eternal Maiden, Vinstar's Metatron, I believe it was, completely taken down. And Hao finds the whole situation to be kind of pointless, as he thinks that all of their sacrifices were in vain. And Manta takes offense to what had gone on. Whereas Manta questions Jean in the original anime, Manta questions Yo, who he's just like, why would you want to just sit back and watch this? And yeah, Yo is not happy with any of this, but he accepted what they tried to do. And in all versions, Vinstar comments that his friend's sacrifice was not in vain, because they found out what Hao's medium was. I will admit it's a little more badass with Vinstar clinging to life after being penetrated by the Spirit of Fire. And in all versions, Hao kind of mocks them by outright stating that it's oxygen, outright stating that fire needs oxygen to burn, and so his medium is oxygen itself. And in all versions, there's this shock that he would just openly tell them, like he's just making fun of them, mocking them and not caring that they know. But Vinstar had a backup plan. There's a little bit of backup information that they don't give in either anime, and that's that Vinstar was a former soldier and had discovered his powers during the Gulf War. And so he has a little something special for Hao. And then he asks the efficient, hey, how powerful is this force field around us? And dude's just like, yeah, it's extremely strong. It'll prevent any kind of interference. You can only pass through from one side. Nothing can get out. It's pretty much impenetrable. And Vinstar's just like, that's a relief. Opens up his little compartment and then pulls out the holy hand grenade. He explains that it'll burn all the oxygen within this area without harming the Maiden. Like, it's stupid powerful. It will burn all oxygen. He's kept it within this contained area, and he even captures Hao with his angel in order to hold him in place. Like the ultimate sacrifice play. It's just like, if the Spirit of Fire needs oxygen, I will remove all oxygen. And just boom, blows himself away. The Officiant only barely gets out. It lights up the entire arena. It is such a meta way to go out. And I love how stunned the spectators are. It's just like, you can't even call foul on what he did. And even Horohoro's taken aback by, their lengths that they would go to. But Yo knows that didn't kill him. And whereas Yo is a little bit more restrained in the manga and newer anime, Yo has this silent fury behind him in the manga and newer anime. It's like he learned from that one fight he had with Faust, where his anger got the better of him and he lost all control, and he ultimately lost in the end. But in the original anime, he loses control very constantly. Like, Vinstar's sacrifice just enrages Yo to a certain degree. And Marco thinks this is his opportunity to finish him off, but then we see in every version that the great Onmyoji, Hao Asakura, has managed to survive. I love that shot. It's so good. Like, there's just this weirdly pure sexual energy emanating from Hao. And there, after all this time, we have it. Every way that all of these chapters were adapted into their two different mediums. It's just that the original anime really tried to put it further towards the climax of things. And in terms of the manga, this is the dead center of the manga. Volume 16 out of 32, there's 16 more volumes left to go. We are pretty much smack dab in the center of the manga. A little bit before even. That's where we're at. There's still some elements that are still yet to be adapted, but the consistency stopped at volume 9 once they got ready to head over to America. Like, right before they headed to America, there was no real filler changes to such an extreme degree. The moment you headed over to America, everything started to be changed and reworked and altered. But there's still manga elements that are adapted into the anime. It's just that they're used in different ways to show different things, to build up different elements. And it's funny too, because like the first time we really see Hao fight with the Spirit of Fire, it's towards the end of the series. And that isn't to say that some of the directions that they took in terms of the original anime were bad. Hao interfering with Yo and his friends, trying to kill off some of them, trying to attack them here and there, just being devious in general, is not like that never happens in the manga. It's just that a lot of Hao's followers are a lot more formidable going forward. You see, they have a lot more power, and a lot of our heroes need to grow in order to meet that power. Because, think about it from this perspective. Hao's followers are studying under the man who wrote that book that Yo gained power from in general. They should be powerful as all get out. It's not to say that Peyote's loss wasn't like a loss, but we find out Peyote wasn't bringing his A game to that fight. He went in with a handicap, and Peyote does some stuff later on that's just kind of like, yeah, Peyote was holding back in that fight against Chocolove. Here in the original manga, in the original anime, everyone's more or less a little bit evenly matched to a certain degree, at least in terms of Yo's friends and Hao's followers. But Hao's just on a different level, and this was the first moment you really realize how much of a different level he was on. And I like this being Hao's first showing of just how merciless he could be, instead of the original anime's way of just having some random mook show up and just be burnt by the spirit of fire simply. It's just like, no, Hao is a lot more vicious when it comes to murdering characters. And you really see that going forward in terms of the manga. The anime, this is about as violent as it gets for him for the most part. But that's the end of this episode of What's the Difference? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. You will never understand how long this really did take for me to get this one out, because there were so much other episodes that just kind of shift through to a certain degree. I didn't want to skip over them because a lot of those episodes are integral to understanding where the original anime was. Unlike with a lot of the earlier episodes before you got to Chocolove, because a lot of the stuff before you get to the Patch Village is to a certain degree kind of negligible, and a lot of the versus House forces, because it's pretty easy to follow to a certain degree. But whereas in the manga, right here and now, it's just like the Shaman fight's still ongoing, and it's only after these events that things start diverting away from the Shaman fight. Whereas with the original anime, I mean, the Shaman fight has just kind of been all over the place, postponed in certain areas. Certain shamans never even make it to the fight proper to be seated and in teams or anything like that. Like, it's basically like you're really weeding out the lesser shamans to a certain degree, and it makes it seem like if that was the case, why even focus on some of the other shamans who couldn't even make it to the shaman fight proper to actually compete in the actual tournament? I mean, let me be real, the tournament is made so much less significant by the original anime. And it's not like the manga doesn't do that, but I mean, at least a few of the fights were interesting and you could get some information from those fights. But my question is, does that really even matter? Do you feel that the shaman fight was actually ever a prevalent thing? That's my question going forward. The original anime kind of seems to say no, especially now where we're at, where Hao is just saying, the heck with the shaman fight, I'm gonna just take the Great Spirit. Whereas in the manga and newer anime, he's showing up, he's showing off. It's obvious he's still unbeatable, I guess I should say. But he's still playing by the rules. And to a certain degree, that's kind of the most intimidating thing, that someone so powerful and so capable is still playing by the rules to a certain degree. That it was only before they actually even got into the Patch Village, that was the one time that Hao had sent his minions after Yo and his friends. I don't know, it feels interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think about all the changes, the differences, and ultimately the power of Hao? Which adaptation really put it at the forefront and made it seem as this indomitable force? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.